When the sun set over ancient Egypt, the temples did not sleep. They woke. Behind locked doors, priests moved through halls lit only by oil flames, whispering prayers no common person ever heard. Rituals were performed in total secrecy. Rituals meant to call gods, calm spirits, and keep the world from breaking. Almost none of it was written down. Almost all of it was forbidden to witness. And yet, traces of these nighttime ceremonies survived. When the last worshiper left the courtyard, the priests sealed the doors with clay and cord, not to keep people out, but to keep something else in nighttime changed everything inside the temple. By day, it was a public place of offerings and music. By night, it became a private world where only the most trusted priests could walk. Their first task was simple but terrifying: to wake the god. They believed the statues inside the temple were not symbols. They were bodies, shells the gods entered during the night. So the priests washed them, dressed them, fed them, and spoke to them like living beings. Then came the more dangerous part. The priests had to walk through long, silent corridors, carrying fire, incense, water, and knives made only for ritual work. Every room had a function. Every movement followed a rule. One mistake was not just disrespect. It was believed to invite chaos. Some texts called the night hours the time of fear, a time when spirits moved freely, when demons tried to enter the temple, when the wrong sound could disturb the god inside. That's why only a few ever saw these rituals, and why none of them were supposed to talk about what they witnessed. Once the god was awakened, the priests moved deeper into the temple, into rooms no sunlight had touched for centuries. Every ritual had a purpose, and every purpose had a fear behind it. One of the most secret ceremonies was the night meal. Priests carried trays of bread, meat, beer, milk, and incense to the inner sanctuary, not for people, for the god believed to be present in the statue. They whispered spells that sounded more like warnings than prayers, spells to keep wandering spirits from stealing the offering, spells to guide the god through the darkness, spells to make sure the world survived the night. And then there were the vigil rites. Priests stayed awake beside the sanctuary, guarding the god's chamber until dawn. They believed that if they fell asleep, dark forces could slip into the temple. So they chanted. They burned incense. They traced protective symbols on the floor with water and natron. The smoke drifted into the halls like thin ghosts. The sound of their voices echoed off the stone, turning every wall into a drum. Other rituals were even more mysterious. Some priests carried knives to cut invisible enemies. Some shook sistra, rattles meant to scare away spirits. Some walked in circles, mimicking the sun's journey through the night sky. These movements weren't symbolic. They were believed to keep the universe in balance until morning. And when the sky finally shifted toward dawn, the priests finished the last task. They put the god to rest, sealing the chamber once more, until the next night called them back. To the Egyptians, daytime was order, nighttime was a risk. When the sun vanished, the world didn't simply darken, it shifted. The boundary between the living and the unseen grew thin. Anything could slip through. and the priests believed they were the only ones keeping that boundary from tearing open. That is why every night ritual mattered. The night was the gods' most vulnerable hour. Egyptians believed the gods weren't all-powerful all the time. They could weaken, they could struggle, they could be attacked. When Ra journeyed through the underworld each night, his ship passed through 12 gates, each guarded by spirits and monsters. Some gates were peaceful, others were pure war. Priests didn't watch from afar. They joined the battle through ritual. Each chant was a shield. Each offering was fuel for the god's journey. Each gesture was a way to steady the fragile balance between day and night. The rituals were timed to the night itself. These ceremonies weren't random. They followed the hours of the night. Hour 1, seal the doors, protect the temple. Hour 3, offer food so the god could regain strength. Hour 5, burn incense to clear the path through darkness. Hour 7, attack Apophis with words, fire, and knives. Hour 9, guide the sun ship past demons and shadow spirits. Hour 12, call for dawn, the moment balance could be restored. The priests matched their actions to Ra's journey, believing that if they performed a step too late or too early, the sun might not rise at all. The temple itself became a weapon. Egyptian temples were designed to channel power. Sound echoed like thunder in narrow halls. The floor sloped subtly, directing movement like a ritual path. Walls carved with spells acted like defenses. Ceilings painted as night skies turned chambers into symbolic heavens. At night, these designs weren't decorative. They were active parts of the ritual, tools meant to disrupt evil or guide divine forces. Some chambers amplified a single whisper until it filled the entire room. Some corners seemed to swallow sound altogether. To the priests, these effects weren't accidents. They were part of the temple's purpose. The priests were chosen, isolated, and watched. Priests who served at night lived differently from others. They had to be purified daily. They avoided certain foods. They often lived inside temple grounds. They followed rules even kings couldn't break. And most importantly, they swore silence. Night priests were not allowed to describe what they saw, not to their families, not to other priests, not to the king. Their knowledge was considered dangerous. A single word could reveal a spell, a weakness, or a sacred detail meant only for the gods. Some priests claimed the gods responded. A few texts, rare, fragile, half-erased, hint at moments that terrified even the priests. One speaks of a statue that breathed in the darkness. Another describes the floor shaking when a chant reached its final line. A third warns of eyes watching from behind the veil. Were these metaphors? Or did the priests truly believe the gods became present? For them, there was no metaphor. The gods were real, awake, and listening. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Every ritual had one goal, to make sure dawn returned. If the priests failed, even once, the world could fall into chaos forever. Crops would die. People would starve. Kings would fall. The Nile would dry. The afterlife itself could collapse. This weight turned each night into a battlefield, and every priest into a guardian, standing between humanity and darkness. To the Egyptians, The night was not empty. It was alive, active, and full of forces at war, and the temple, glowing with faint firelight, was the front line. The night rituals weren't performed in silence. Something always answered back. At least, that's what the priests believed. In their writings, priests described moments so strange that even they struggled to explain them. Some claimed the statues shifted when the incense grew thick. Others swore the air turned warm beside figures carved from cold stone. There were recordings of sounds, faint knocks, a low hum, a whisper that didn't match any human voice. Most of these events took place in the inner sanctuary, where the god was believed to descend into the statue. Priests said the room felt heavier, as if someone unseen had stepped inside. One priest wrote that when he placed bread before the statue, a breath passed over my hand. Another mentioned that the flame on his lamp bent sideways, even though no one walked past. To the priests, these were not warnings. They were proof that the god was present. And when something went wrong, the signs were even stronger. A statue cracked unexpectedly, a lamp refused to stay lit, or a priest felt dizzy inside the chamber. These were taken as messages, signs that the god was displeased, or that something dark was watching from the corner. Whatever the truth was, one thing is clear. The priests believed they weren't alone in the temple at night. Not every ceremony performed in the temple was meant to be known. Some were kept hidden, even from other priests. These were the forbidden rites, the ones performed when the kingdom was in danger, when drought hit, when plague spread, or when signs in the sky turned strange. The most feared was the rite of severing, a ritual meant to cut ties between Egypt and a spirit or demon believed to be attacking the land. It involved wax figures, fire, and a series of violent gestures, destroying symbols to protect the living. Another forbidden ritual was the night of the empty throne, performed only when the pharaoh was dying. Priests believed that during those hours, the bond between the king and the gods weakened, leaving Egypt vulnerable. They gathered in the sanctuary, reciting spells to keep evil away until the next ruler could take the throne. Some rites were forbidden because they were too dangerous. One involved calling the ka of a god directly, not through prayer, but through an invitation. If the ritual failed, the priests believed the god could withdraw its protection, or something else could answer instead. These rituals were never written clearly. Only fragments survive. But they all share one message. Some nights inside the temple were darker than others. Egyptians didn't hide these rituals because they were ashamed. They hid them because they believed the knowledge was explosive, too powerful to fall into the wrong hands. The temple was a boundary. Knowledge was part of that boundary. If common people learned the secret spells, they might misuse them or break them or bring chaos without meaning to. But there was another reason. Priests believed that speaking certain knowledge outside the temple broke its power. A ritual shared was a ritual weakened. A spell repeated by someone untrained lost its strength. So they locked their teachings away in coded texts, half-finished lines, and symbols only another priest could decode. Over time, Egypt fell, Temples crumbled, priests died, and the secrets they protected, spells, chants, movements, night rites, disappeared with them. What survived were shadows, burn marks, scattered tools, strange carvings, and faint traces of rituals the world was never meant to see. The silence wasn't accidental. It was designed. The knowledge was buried because the priests believed the world wasn't ready to carry it without them. Even now, when tourists walk through broken columns and sunlit courtyards, they only see the day. They see the stone, the carvings, the ruins frozen in silence. But the temples remember the night. They remember the footsteps of priests moving like shadows. They remember the sound of chants pressed into the walls. They remember the heat of offerings, the smell of incense, the pressure of hands tracing protective signs that have long faded from view. And if you stand inside one long enough, when the crowd finally leaves, something becomes clear. These places were never built for daylight. Their hallways were shaped for echo. Their chambers were made for breath and presence. Their ceilings were painted as night skies, not for beauty, but for function. The Egyptians didn't hide their nighttime rituals because they were strange. They hid them because they believed they were dangerous, powerful enough to hold back chaos until morning. And maybe that's why so much was lost. Not because history forgot, but because forgetting was safer. Still, the traces remain. Faint burn marks, broken statues, hidden rooms that never saw the sun. Reminders that the most important work in Egypt didn't happen under the open sky. It happened in the dark. And if the temples hold echoes of those forgotten rites, then somewhere in the shadows, the gods they served might still be listening